Hello, everyone. My name is Len Bruskowitz. I am joined by Steve Kent and Pete Heyman for this webinar on endgame planning for your business, financial, and personal lives. And our plan here is to talk uh, briefly for 10 to 12 minutes each, and then we will be available to answer any questions you have. If you do have a question, please use the Q&A button and type your question in there. The one other thing we'll talk about right up front is that if you would like a copy of the slides, please just go into the Q&A and say slides, please, and that'll be associated with your name, and we will follow up with the slides after this presentation. So with that, I'm going to kick things off. My name is Len Bruskowitz. I'm a business coach. And the first thing I want to talk about is some of the challenges that business owners who are thinking about transitioning deal with. And when I say thinking about transitioning, I mean they're thinking about moving out of their business in the next 2 to say 10 years, could be 20 years as well. All of these things that I'm going to talk about are relevant. And really, every business should have a transition plan. But I'm going to focus more on those who are thinking about in that 2 to 10 years. And one of the really scary things is that over half of business owners don't understand what their exit options are. It's like, what can they do with their business when they want to move on? I'm going to talk about what some of those are. So hang tight there. The next one I want to talk about is almost 80% have no written transition plan. Um, that is a problem. And it's a problem because unless someone else can see what's in your head or the business owner's head, they don't know what's going on. They don't know how to continue to run the business should something happen. So having a written transition plan for your business is super important. Um, but it sounds like almost half of the small businesses that were surveyed have done no planning at all, which is problematic, especially for a stat I'm going to show you on the next slide. And finally, 94% in this survey, which was done of about 3,000 business owners in the US, 94% have no written plan for their next chapter. And that is scary because it's a huge red flag when business owners are trying to sell their business. And what I mean by no written plan for their next chapter is what are they going to do with themselves after they move out of the business? So, my next slide I'm going to talk about is why this matters. And the first one is really shocking in that 80% of an owner's wealth is tied up in their business. And by owner's wealth, I mean financial assets are tied up in the business. And that's a big piece, right? But what's even more concerning is that only about 20 to 25% of small businesses that go up for sale in the US actually sell. And where that's an issue is if you end up not being able to sell your business, that's a big piece of your financial wealth that you're not going to be able to um, harvest. So super important that you understand this, and my compatriots are going to talk about some of the reasons of how to deal with that. But just know that that's a stat out there that most of the wealth is tied up in the value of the business. 50% of the business transitions in the US are involuntary. And what that means is that they're changing hands not on the owner's timeline or on their terms. And the major reasons for involuntary transfers are what we call the 5 Ds: death, disability, divorce, disagreement between partners, and distress. The first three are probably pretty self explanatory. Disagreement between partners that own a business is a big issue, and distress. Think of the pandemic as being the distress D. But half the businesses change hands because of one of those 5 things. And you can plan for them. They still may happen, but having a plan in place is going to make that situation uh, better, even though bad things may still happen. And the final thing on here is that 3/4 of owners regret selling their business after 1 year. There are a lot of reasons for that. Kind of the main ones are a lot of small business owners have an emotional attachment to the job they're doing and the people that they work with. And that's hard to give up. Another reason is financial concerns. They may be worried that they didn't sell it for enough, and so that they may not have all those assets that they wanted to do their next great thing. And then the final one is the identity shift. Lots of business owners, yourselves included, I think are have a standing in the community. They're pillars of their local communities, and now that they no longer own the business, that's not as much the case. These can all be dealt with if with some thoughtful things. Again, from my colleagues here that are going to speak later are going to address some of these things. Um, the next thing I wanted to talk about is how companies are valued. And there are really two things that I want to talk about is how is your business valued today? And there are really three common methodologies. Uh, the most common one is the income approach. And that is basically saying that the value of your business is a multiple of the profits you're generating today. So I'm going to show you an example on the next slide, but just know that most companies that are in the kind of, under 10 million in revenue are valued based on their income and a multiple of their income. The asset approach is used primarily in businesses that have lots of equipment or that own a lot of real estate. Um, and finally, the one is the market approach, not used as commonly in small businesses in the U.S. because there just aren't enough businesses sold where the purchase price is public. So again, income approach, and I'm going to show you an example of that. But in the future, really the value of your business is predicated on how much you want or need out of the business. So if you have a goal looking down the road and say, I want N million dollars, you can really the only way to make up any gap you have is with the business. Yes, you can save and invest, but really the only way to make up a big gap is through the value of your business. And you can do that by focusing on value creation strategies you can take now in advance of wanting to transition out. So, what drives value, you may ask? Well, two real things. One is the attractiveness of your company, and that's viewed from the outside. The idea here is the industry your business is in growing or contracting? Is your company a leader or not so much a leader? And what's your reputation in the market? Are you viewed as the quality and the high integrity provider, or are you just the lowest cost provider? So that's what potential buyers can see from the outside. And I'll just be really upfront, as much as these are important, they are far from the majority of the value of your company. What's really driving the value is the stuff on the right side. And this is what's called your business preparedness. There's actually a value you can come up with this. And these are what you might call intangible assets. They're kind of hard to touch, but they drive a lot of the value. And they're called the four C's. So structural, customer, social, and human capital. The capital four C's. And what they really look at is, how much is the business process documented? Can somebody else come in and run this business, or is it all in the owner's head? If it's all in the owner's head, the value is going to be very, very low and maybe not sellable at all. And in terms of the customers, do you only have two or three customers, or do you have a lot of customers? A lot of customers is typically better. And is your revenue recurring? In other words, you can count on for next month. Recurring revenue is valued much more highly. And then the social and human are around, what's the culture of your company? Is it super strong? Do your employees love working there? Is the owner not required to be in the office every day? That's a huge value if the business can be run without the owner. And then, are there team members that have specific experience? The higher these are, the higher the multiple that you're going to get and the value of what your company is going to be valued at. And there's a little formula at the bottom that value equals the cash flows or the profits of your business in the future divided by one plus the risk associated with that. And risk is typically done as a percentage. So you can imagine that as the riskiness gets higher, that percentage gets higher, your value gets lower. So it's a quick formula of how value is calculated. Now I'm going to walk through a little example here, and I'm going to keep this simple, but there are really two kinds of um, gaps to understand. And so I'm just picking a representative company here, Company A, and Company A does 5 million in revenue per year, and they generate 10% profit on that revenue. The best in class company in their industry generates $5 million in revenue as well, but they earn 20% in profits or $1 million a year. And so the profit gap between Company A and the best in class is a $500,000. Doesn't seem like that much, does it? But when we go over to the right side, we talk about the value gap. You and you look at the profit that they're making, as well as all of those intangible assets I talked about on the last slide, their customer capital and others. You see that Company A would get a 2 times profit multiple, which would yield the value of that company of $1 million. But the best in class is not only getting double the profit, but they're getting a 4 times higher multiple because their processes are documented, because the owner isn't required to be there every day. Their valuation is $4 million. And so a value now, the gap is $3 million. Again, these are companies that are the same size. They're generating the same amount of revenue. So the idea here is that you can calculate these gaps, but how well your company is prepared and how efficiently it's run determines what your multiple is. Okay. So I'm going to talk real quickly about exit options. So there are a few more than these. There's initial public offerings, which I'm guessing most of the folks on this call are not in that position where they're going to go public. The two most common exit options for you to consider are to pass along to a family member, a succession plan. And then the second most common is to sell to a third party. There are lots of people out looking to buy existing businesses. So that's a pretty common way. There are also private equity firms that will buy companies. Another option would be to merge with a partner or a competitor, to sell to management or employees, an employee stock ownership plan, or the final one, which is to shut down and just liquidate the assets of the companies. So all these are valid in their own ways. They all have pros and cons, but it's good to just know what some of those options are. All right. And for my final slide, I want to just give you some advice as to what you can do now, in the short term to move toward that best in class. And one of the things I talk about is focusing on just a couple areas that you can improve in the next 90 days. And why do I say 3 to 5? Because it's manageable. And why do I say 90 days? Because you want to focus on something that you can have an impact on, and it will build your confidence to then go after the next thing. So look at a couple areas in your business, think of what you can do to improve them. And just as importantly, stop doing things that aren't contributing to your growth or increasing your risk. You may have customers that generate a lot of revenue, but not any profit. It's time to just start to look at them and say, we've got to move on here, because a potential buyer who looks at your company is going to say, why are you generating all this revenue but no profit? So it's better to focus on the customers that are really generating something for you. So those are just some quick ideas I had for you, just in terms of things you should consider as you're transitioning, looking to transition your business in the next couple of years. And up next is going to be Steve Kent, who's going to cover the personal financial side of transitioning. So Steve, you're on.
Great. Thank you, Len. Appreciate it. Great information. Thanks for sharing. So we're going to talk for a few minutes about what you need to consider when planning for your financial future. It's something that people hear about, but don't necessarily do something about or know your options. Next, please. So let's talk briefly about what is financial freedom. Next. So the first thing I really want to talk about is, while you're working with Len, getting your business ready to sell in that 2 to 7 year time frame, is how do you protect you and your business financially today? The thing to ask yourself first is, if you have more than one partner, Is that business protected if something happens to that second or third partner? It's something called a buy-sell agreement, which you may or may not have heard of. But what it really comes down to is if you have partner A and partner B, and partner B passes away, somebody else is going to have that portion of the business. You, as partner A, want that entire business, but how do you buy partner B's piece from the spouse or whoever else has it? That's the buy sell agreement. Very important to do that so you can maintain control and run it your way. Another thing is your business legally and financially separate from your personal assets? When I had my business in 2013, I used a subchapter S because if something happened, if somebody took legal action against me, it stays in the business level and I'm protected. So it's something you really need to think about. Excuse me. Another thing to think about is, do you have a trust in place? The trust is great because it is protected from the court system. So if you have a will, you go through probate, it's the courts, it's attorneys, and you can lose a lot of money just to that in time. But if you have a trust, it's all documented, it's separate, and nothing happens, and you can transact any business after that much more quickly and less expensively. Thank you. Next, please. What a lot of people hear about, myself included, are what are your goals? In this case of this presentation, what are your goals for now and post business? And the key is to start looking at these goals now so that you can plan for them when that time comes. For example, how are you saving for retirement? If everything you have is in the business and you're drawing money now, how do you live on what income when the business is no longer there? It would make sense, I would think, to eliminate your debt as much as you can now. So again, you need less money to live on later and enjoy your life. Are you going to change your environment? Are you going to live in the same house, in the same state? Do you want another house? Are your parents going to move in with you? Will you have the need to earn more money? How do you plan for that? Because there's always those unexpected things that come along. Well, you have to take care of a loved one. You could have a spouse, a child that may get sick, maybe a chronic something, Alzheimer's, dementia, that you need to take care of someone. You want to control your time, which Coach Pete is going to talk about soon, about how do you control your time and what do you do with it now that you have all this extra time? Do you want to travel the world? I would love to do that. And that is on my bucket list. Or are you going to have to fund someone else's education? Well, maybe your own, maybe a spouse, a child, a grandchild. Whose education would you have to fund? Thank you. All right, so now another thing to consider that people may not think about are the four enemies of money. Those include taxes, inflation, losses in the market, and indecision. Some of these you can do something about, some of them you can't. So let's address these very quickly. So let's talk, how can we overcome these enemies? The first is, oh, please go ahead. Thank you. Right on target. Thanks, Len. So the first of those are taxes. Now there's good news and there's bad news. The bad news is taxes have to be paid. We cannot get away from that. But the good news is you have the option to say when and how much taxes you want to pay. For example, the leftmost chart says, I'm going to pay tax all the time on everything I earn. Not the greatest scenario, but that is a scenario. The middle graph says, I'm going to not pay tax now when I'm making a small amount of money or my investments are low, but I am going to pay more taxes later when my investments are high. Again, not the ideal situation because you're going to pay more taxes later. The rightmost graph says, I'm going to pay a little bit of tax now and no tax later. That again, 3 examples, the choice is yours, but where do you want to pay the taxes? And this can be done for you. Next slide, please. So another thing to think about are market losses. Now, we're all programmed through the media that we can only have one of the following things. We can either grow our money, get a reasonable rate of return, have income for life, or protect our principal. And that's what we're told. And if you can only have one of those 4, which one would that be? But the good news is, what if you could have all 4? What if you could grow your money, get a reasonable rate of return, have income for life, and protect the principal from the downsides in the market? Again, this is something most people don't think about, don't know, but it can be done. Next slide, please. The last piece, which is the indecision piece, and I suffered from this for years. I like to equate this as information is coming at us so quickly that we can either look at it as a garden hose or a fire hose. And when that fire hose opens up, there is so much information, we get paralyzed by the amount and we get confused and we do nothing. So the way to get around this is to break it down into small pieces. First, identify your time frames. When do you want to retire? When do you want to sell the business? And again, talk to Len. When do you want to pay those taxes? What's your appetite to pay them? What's your risk tolerance for losses in the market? If your investments are going up and down and you have that risk tolerance, that's great. But think about what happens if the money in your investment goes down right before you retire. That means you either retire on less money or you keep working. And frankly, neither one is a great option. Also, identify your ideal income once the business is sold. So having said all that, last point here is to work with an independent licensed professional to assist you with all the things we just talked about. Now, I'd like to turn it over to Pete Heyman to take us through personal growth in our 3rd section.
Thanks so much, Steve. And Len, too. Wow, such terrific advice for business owners. Really great stuff. And my piece is to remind you about, don't forget about your personal growth, your personal life, your emotional life, as you're planning your next phase of your business and selling and preparing to sell your business. Don't forget your personal life, your personal growth. It's so important to do the kinds of things that both Len and Steve talked about in terms of planning for your future. So it's important not to forget your own personal growth. Think about it this way. You've served others in growing your business. You've served your teams that you've put together. You've served your organization, and you've served your clients. Now it's time to really begin to serve your needs first. I like to say, be your own client at this stage of life. Think about yourself. Now, just a little bit about me. I'm a career and life coach, and what I do is I guide, I mentor, I coach people, often through the ages and stages of life, because most of us know that we go through ages and stages, and each age and stage of life can bring challenge, and sometimes we get stuck in those challenges. I see my role working with my clients to help them see the opportunities and the possibilities beyond that feeling of being stuck. And I don't know how many of you are in or approaching the 4th quarter of your life. Maybe you're in the 3rd quarter of your life. It doesn't really matter, because the message today is to think ahead, to really plan. And every stage of life presents challenges, as I mentioned. Sometimes we forget about and ignore the fourth quarter of life. And that stage is just as important to explore the opportunities and the possibilities. It's a great time for engagement, enrichment, personal growth, fulfillment. Fourth quarter can be just as fulfilling, can be even more fulfilling than the previous segments of your life, if you plan ahead, if you think about it. And now is a great time to do just that. Next slide, please. I often give my clients assignments that I call assignments. And one of them is to take a personal inventory. And I think this is important at any stage of life, but definitely in the fourth quarter or the stage that you're preparing to divest yourself from your business, it's great to do this as well. So I like to have my clients create a skills list. Identify your strengths, your capabilities, your skills, your talents, all the things you've acquired and learned to do over the years. I think it's really important to note those qualities and to take stock in them and appreciate them about yourself. Second list I ask many of my clients to create, may sound funny, but create your lovable list. What do I mean by that? It's writing down and acknowledging the qualities that you have that make people want to be with you, want to spend time with you, want to be in your sphere. And I call it your lovable list. And the third list is to create your passions list. What are you passionate about? What are you most passionate about doing in your life? Next slide. So next slide, please. This personal inventory can lead to this kind of Venn diagram exercise. And it's 4 concentric circles. At the top, these are the things you love to do. Then there's things you do well. Then there's the things that the world needs. And then what may be important to you in this next phase, or it may not be as important, things the world will pay for. And as these concentric circles overlap, we can discover our purpose in life. And maybe you've led a very purposeful life, and that's wonderful. But at this stage where you're preparing to sell or transfer your business, it can be a great time to repurpose your life. What are those things you never quite got to that are in your heart that you really want to do? This is a great exercise to do that. You can discover it. Next slide. And it's really never too late to do this, any stage of life. I believe in coaching based on positivity. And that means surround yourself in positivity as much as you can. By that I mean surround yourself with people who believe in you, who support you, who uplift you. And you know the difference in your life. You know the people to really gather around and make sure they're around you to support you. And then also, what are the activities that bring you purpose and fulfillment? You can go back to your lists from the previous slide and re-look at what you're passionate about and what really brings you fulfillment and also joy. And it's very important to take time for yourself to replenish and enrich your life and your soul. Check in with yourself. As I said before, you've spent most of your career, most of your business life really doing for others and serving others as you build your business. Now is a great time, and by the way, any time is a great time, to really take the time to replenish, check in with your heart, what's important to you, and fill those needs. Next slide. Next, please. This is an exercise sometimes I call it "This Is Your Life." For those of you who remember that old TV show, ladies and gentlemen, this is your life. Well, it's an exercise to create your life grid, and it's to identify the segments of your life or the compartments of your life that you most want to do and you want to activate now. These are the areas of life you want to prioritize in your fourth quarter or third quarter or whatever quarter you're in. It's a great exercise to go by. Now, in this case, this example has 9 boxes. Nothing magical about 9. It could be 6 or 5, whatever suits you. But this is an example. These are the things that are important, could be important to you. Contribution, whatever that means. Could be volunteering, could be your community work. What are your hobbies? Now, maybe you haven't devoted much time to hobby as you built your business, but what are the hobbies that you really enjoy? What are the things in your leisure life that are important to you? How important is your family? And you can state that and have that as part of your life grid. Is alone time important to you? Maybe you haven't had much alone time attending to and growing your business, but maybe that's important to you. Also, personal growth, working with a coach. I always like to give that as an example, or any kind of personal growth, reading, studying, and applying it to yourself. How important is work still in your life? Relationships, what are they? How important are they in your life? And also friends. Now, again, you can take 9 boxes in a blank grid and then fill in your own areas of your life that are most important to you. And then with each of those boxes, I would suggest you prioritize the things within, for example, leisure. What are the things that bring you joy and contentment and pleasure in your leisure time and your personal growth and in your family life? And you kind of prioritize that. You can even put a percentage of time that you want to spend with family. Maybe you haven't spent the time that you wanted to over the years as you were attending your business. Now's a great time to plug in what's going to bring you joy and happiness with your family, etc. And in terms of work, you could sell a business and still work if you want. You could still create another business or another way of making money. That's up to you. It's never, ever too late. I'm a great example of that. I've been a life coach now for 12 years. Well, before that, I was in sales, marketing, and advertising for 30 plus years. It was a wonderful life, purposeful life. I found, in this stage of my life, a repurpose that I can't tell you how rewarding it is. It's just amazing. And you can do that too. Next slide. Oops. So together with someone you trust, like a coach, you can explore how you're prepared for this next stage of your life. Now, you can check in, obviously, with Len and Steve regarding your financial stability, regarding the legacy of your business and how you're going to turn that over. And I just want to say you can do that for your emotional part of your life as well. And by building on the positives in your life and what you most want to do moving forward, believe me, you can make the next phase of your life, whether it's third or fourth quarter, just as fulfilling, just as satisfying, just as productive and fun as possible and as it's been before, maybe more so. This next phase of your life, as you prepare the legacy of your business, you can just let it shine. Let your light shine. And that's what I would recommend. So enjoy, go forward, and plan. How we doing, guys? We getting back together?
Awesome.
Do we have
Thank
any?
you, Steve. Thank you, Pete.
Has anybody entered any questions?
As of now, I don't see any questions from the participants. Does anyone have any questions for us? Anything we can expand on for you?
You put those in the Q&A. That would be great.
So we have Ted says, great info, would appreciate the slides also. Okay, Ted, we will make sure you get the slides.
Awesome.
Writing down EAIG. All right, that's great. No problem, Ted. Does anyone else have any thoughts, any questions that we can clarify?
Has anybody identified, Len said something that I jotted down about the identity shift that you go through when you begin to prepare to sell your business or move to the next level with your business. Does anybody identify with that identity shift? That all of a sudden, whoops, I'm going to lose my identity, or how are people going to perceive me? Does that relate to anybody?
I mean, I've definitely seen it with clients. the example I talked about where, a lot of business owners who have been doing things are pillars in their community, and they're looked to when somebody needs a donation for, the sports team or the dance troupe or whatever it is. And business owners get a lot of positive reinforcement out of that. When somebody needs something, they're the one to go to, and they provide great services to their client, to their customers, and they just are a big part of the community. So I've definitely seen that as a struggle, and the way that they've overcome that is to just channel it. Right now, maybe they become that, but at the local, YMCA or at the senior center or wherever it is, they still have that identity. It's just not associated with their business. So that's what I've seen from clients.
And
Ted
Ted
did write
commented
in.
in, oh, I'm sorry, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, go ahead, Pete.
I was just saying that Ted commented in the Q&A that he thinks that's a huge matter for many of his friends, and that's what stood out with me too, Len, when you talked. I think that is a major factor as we invest so much in our business life and our career. What happens when that shifts? And that's where some of the personal growth kinds of exploration can come, and you can rediscover what maybe has been in your heart all along to do. Well, now you have time to refocus and shift that identity and really create a new identity. It can be very, very exciting if you dive into it and process it. I think that's true of what each of us is saying today, Len, Steve, and myself. It's a matter of asking the right questions, getting the right advice, teaming up with the right advisor, and creating that future, that next, capital letters next.
Correct. And there's so much information, it does make sense to talk to someone who has experience in it. Don't just think you know it all, because there are so many moving parts. All right. Anyone else have any thoughts, questions? All right. Well,
All
Ted,
right,
thank you
I say we
for.
wrap it up.
Yep. Ted, thank you for your feedback. It was appreciated. All right, so let's wrap it up. So thank you again, everyone, for attending, and we will get the slides out. Does anyone else want the slides besides Ted? I guess not. Okay, we will make sure you get them, Ted. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.